At the beginning of the story, we find ourselves in the city of Italy, where a deadly disease called the plague is sweeping through the population. We are introduced to a young man who has been working as a painter in a church for quite some time, and much like a freelancer today, he has yet to receive a single coin for his efforts. He goes to the priest to collect the money he is owed, only to find that the priest has died of the plague. He quickly realizes that his payment has gone to the grave along with the father. Being a man of creative problem solving, a wicked idea takes root in his mind. He decides to simply assume the identity of the deceased priest. No more worrying about food, and as a bonus, he would be surrounded by beautiful nuns, a terrible plan with surprisingly good benefits. On the other side of the story, we meet a young man named Lawrence, who is the main character of our tale. Some dangerous men are hunting him down because Lawrence had the spectacularly poor judgment of losing a large sum of money in a bet with a local gangster. Since he couldn't repay the debt, the gangster ordered his men to kill him. Fortunately, Lawrence's friends helped him escape the city just in time. Meanwhile, we are introduced to a princess named Pampina, whose parents have recently died of plague. Sensing an opportunity, a powerful man named Tsar Germano arrives at her doorstep. With no family left to protect her, Pampina was an easy target, and Germano knew it. He offered her his protection, claiming he would look after her from now on, though his real intentions were far less noble. Pampina, however, was no fool. She declared firmly that she would give herself only to the Russian prince she was promised to, and to no other man. Germano, deeply displeased, revealed that her late father had borrowed a large sum of money from him, and suggested that if she were to please him for some time, the debt would be forgiven. This, of course, was entirely a lie designed to manipulate her. The scene then shifts back to Lawrence, who is still galloping away on horseback with the gangster's men in hot pursuit. On the road, he comes across a funeral procession and asks the man leading it where the road ahead leads. The man tells him it leads to a convent, a place where a group of nuns live, completely cut off from the outside world. The man being buried had, in fact, worked there as a gardener before succumbing to the plague. Lawrence's eyes lit up. A job opening at a place full of nuns, deep in the woods, far from gangsters? Perfect. He asked whether he could apply for the gardener's position. The man replied that unfortunately he could not, as the convent only hired people who were deaf and mute, believing such individuals to be innocent and unlikely to cause trouble. Lawrence filed that information away for later. While trying to escape the goons, Lawrence climbed a tree, which would have been a fine escape plan had the branch beneath his feet not snapped, sending him crashing to the ground and knocking him completely unconscious. Sometime later, a group of beautiful nuns stumbled upon him. Having never encountered a man before in their sheltered lives, they picked him up, carried him to the convent, and proceeded to examine him with great curiosity, checking his hands, feet, and every other part of him, the way one might inspect a peculiar new exhibit. One nun, unable to contain herself, kissed him. Then she turned to her companion and enthusiastically recommended she do the same. Her companion needed very little persuasion. What none of them realized was that Lawrence had in fact regained consciousness some time earlier. He was simply lying still and pretending, which frankly was the wisest decision he had made in years. Eventually, a particularly enthusiastic nun's kiss pushed things a bit too far, and Lawrence opened his eyes just as the Mother Superior arrived. The nuns quickly composed themselves and informed Mother Nun that the boy appeared to be deaf and mute. The mother was delighted, as that was precisely what the convent required. And so Lawrence, saying absolutely nothing and performing his most convincing impression of a man who cannot hear or speak, was hired on the spot. Mother then ordered the nuns to bathe him. The nuns were thrilled. You can use your imagination from here. The scene then shifts to Pampina. Exhausted and distressed by Germano's advances, she confides in her friends, who suggest she take refuge at a nearby convent, a place where only nuns reside, safe from men like Germano. They decide to travel there, and they bring along the fake priest from the beginning of the story. As fate and the plot would have it, they all end up at the very same convent where Lawrence is now working. Upon arrival, the nuns dress Pampina in white robes, and she hopes that perhaps in this holy place she might find some peace. She did not quite anticipate what kind of establishment she had actually walked into. While changing her clothes, her eyes land on Lawrence. She asks the nuns who he is, and they explain that he is the convent's gardener, deaf and mute, completely harmless. Pampina is struck by his good looks, but the memory of her Russian prince helps her keep her feelings in check, for now. That afternoon, while Lawrence was trimming the grass, one of the nuns invited him to the garden, saying a flower needed watering. The flower in question did not require actual water, and we shall leave it at that. Pampina watched them go, feeling a sharp and unmistakable pang of jealousy. Meanwhile, the Russian prince arrived at Pampinia's palace to claim his bride, only to find Germano waiting there. Mistaking Germano for her father, the prince cheerfully offered gifts for him and his wife. Germano flatly corrected him he was not her father. The prince, undeterred, suggested he might then be her grandfather. Germano did not find this funny at all. He announced that he was to be Pampinia's future husband. The prince, wisely choosing to avoid conflict, was about to leave when someone informed him that Pampinia could be found at a nearby church. He changed direction immediately. Back at the convent, more nuns arrived at Lawrence's door, pretending to bring him food. In truth, they had heard glowing reviews from their fellow sisters and had come to experience the same. They made their request quite plainly, and Lawrence, being the dedicated public servant that he had inadvertently become, obliged. On another front, Pampinia's friends were passing through a forested area on their way back to the city when two young men from town called out to them. Since the area was quite rural and handsome, young men were a rare sight, the girls became rather excited. They exchanged signals with the boys that required no translation, and soon everyone had retreated to a cowshed for what can only be described as an unscheduled recreational activity, until one of the girls' companions caught them in the act, dragged everyone out by the ear, and restored some semblance of dignity to the group. Back at the convent, two nuns approached Pampinia and invited her to join them in giving Lawrence a bath. Pampinia, horrified, told them that what they were doing was sinful. The nuns replied with admirable honesty that they could tell she was jealous, and that she was welcome to join them. Pampinia declined firmly. Lawrence was then brought before the Mother Superior, who, after having resisted for quite some time, also surrendered to temptation. Whatever happened next is between her and her conscience. Pampinia, meanwhile, was quietly suffering. She had developed genuine feelings for Lawrence, which made everything she was witnessing deeply uncomfortable. Then one day, while passing by the garden, she heard Lawrence bathing and singing cheerfully to himself. The man was absolutely not deaf and mute. She now knew the truth. The following day, Pampinia was reading in the garden, while Lawrence worked nearby. Lawrence stole glances at her, struck by a feeling he couldn't quite place. Later, Pampinia quietly slipped into the room where Lawrence was resting. Understanding why she had come, Lawrence turned toward her, but Pampinia covered his eyes with a cloth. She told him gently that she truly loved him and did not wish to use him the way the others had. She kissed him softly and left. Lawrence, blindfolded throughout, had no idea who this mysterious girl was, but the kiss stayed with him. Time passed, and eventually the day of Pampinia's departure arrived. Before leaving, she went to the Mother Superior and revealed the truth. Lawrence was neither deaf nor mute. She had heard him singing alone in the garden. Pampinia's real motive, of course, was that she did not want the nuns keeping Lawrence there indefinitely. Mother was furious and expelled Lawrence from the convent immediately. On her way out, Pampinia crossed paths with Lawrence. He asked her to take him with her. Pampinia, who had been hoping for exactly this moment, agreed without much resistance. Elsewhere, the Russian prince was traveling in search of Pampinia when his wife grew thirsty and he stopped at a spring. There he encountered a beautiful young woman bathing, and mentioned that he was searching for a princess named Pampinia. The girl, seizing the opportunity with impressive speed, asked him to describe her appearance. When the prince admitted he had never actually seen her, the girl smiled and announced that she was Pampinia. The prince believed her entirely, which says a great deal about the prince's investigative abilities. Meanwhile, the real Pampinia and Lawrence arrived at the location of her arranged wedding. Pampinia asked Lawrence if he had feelings for anyone. Lawrence admitted he had fallen for a nun from the convent, a girl who had covered his eyes and kissed him, whose face he had never seen. He said his heart told him he would find her one day. Just as Pampinia was about to confess that she was that very girl, Germano arrived and attacked Lawrence. When Lawrence was on the verge of losing the fight, Pampinia threatened to take her own life if Germano killed him. This stopped Germano in his tracks. He chose instead to throw Lawrence in prison. The next day, Pampinia struck a deal with Germano. She would marry him if he released Lawrence. Germano agreed and freed Lawrence. The fake priest was then summoned to perform the wedding ceremony. Pampinia, of course, had absolutely no intention of going through with it. She slipped the fake priest some gold coins beforehand and instructed him to delay and derail the proceedings by any means necessary. The fake priest rose magnificently to the occasion. He asked Germano whether he had bathed that day. Germano said yes. The priest inquired whether the water had been hot or cold. He then asked Germano to show his hands, inspected them theatrically, and announced that they were dirty. As he refused to proceed with the ceremony until Germano had washed them properly, Germano stormed off to wash his hands, and in that window of time, both the Russian prince and a freshly escaped Lawrence arrived on the scene. A fight broke out against Germano. When Germano attempted to flee, Lawrence cut off his path, and in the ensuing struggle, Germano fell into a well and died, which was, all things considered, a fitting end. The prince then approached Pampinia and declared his wish to marry her. Pampinia told him kindly but firmly that her heart belonged to someone else. The prince looked as though he might faint, but before the situation could become too dramatic, the girl who had falsely claimed to be Pampinia at the spring stepped forward, and the prince, apparently very flexible on the matter of which Pampinia he married, went to her quite happily. Lawrence began to walk away. Pampinia called after him and asked where he was going. He said he was returning to the convent to find the girl who had blindfolded him and proposed to him, the one he had never stopped thinking about. Pampinia asked him to close his eyes, and then quietly she told him everything. Lawrence understood. The girl he had been searching for had been right beside him all along, and with that, the movie ends. If you enjoy stories like this, be sure to subscribe and share your thoughts about the movie in the comments below.